You know, for a while now, viewers have been asking me, Brian, when are you going to review WrestleMania 17? I mean, it's only one of the greatest manias of all time. Heck, this year we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of that show. So it's crazy to think you haven't covered this show yet. Well, to those folks I say, you must be new here, because the truth is, 8 long years ago, I did review Mania 17. But you know, one thing led to another, and the video got blocked, and over time I've been trying to make those little cuts, the content ID whack-a-mole to get it back up, but now it's to the point where it's been butchered so badly, even if I got it back up there for public consumption, it would not closely resemble the review that I originally published all that time ago. So with the old review as chopped up as it is, I figure now, since it is the 25th anniversary of the show, it's time to once again revisit this iconic event and see just how well it holds up, if it truly does belong in the category of the best of all time. We are going to look back one more time at WrestleMania 17, aka WrestleMania X7, from April 1st, 2001 at the Reliant Astrodome in Houston, Texas. So many reasons people consider this to be the greatest WrestleMania of all time. It's got one of the biggest main events in the rematch between Austin and The Rock. It's got the killer official theme of My Way by Limp Bizkit. That song really defines an era. And then, of course, it is the victory lap. It is the end of the Monday Night War, because the WWF has bought out WCW, and now this is just kind of the end. It is the curtain call. It is a huge vindication of the WWF and the meteoric rise they have been on in the last few years to become the global juggernaut once again. It is also considered to be one of the greatest of all time because it does seem to represent a pivotal point in wrestling history where the supposed good times aren't much longer for this world, in terms of wrestling being universally regarded as being cool and acceptable again, and fun to watch for that matter, most importantly. And I think this show also really bucks the idea of long and fleshed out builds being necessary to create a good WrestleMania. Think about the online discourse of this year. And I don't know because I don't watch, but it seems like a lot of people were really down on the build for WrestleMania this year. Oh my God, it's the worst build ever. Oh, I can't believe it. Oh, it's so terribly built. And the thing is, when you get back to it and you watch the Raws and the SmackDowns leading up to this show, the build wasn't that great either. Half of the card on this show wasn't really made official until like a week before this event. And if you look at the company like going out of No Way Out in February, you can have some kind of idea of where the Mania card might be going, but a lot of those threads you see go in totally different directions come April 1st. And so it seems that, they don't really know what they're doing oftentimes when they're booking these Manias. I can't think of a time, actually, now that I think about this, where people go, wow, that was a really good Mania build. Those 6 to 8 weeks leading up to WrestleMania, boy, I feel like my appetite has been perfectly whetted, for this WrestleMania. I can't remember the last time I've heard anyone say, wow, that was a good Mania build, and then follow it up with wow, that was also a good Mania. I feel that those things hardly ever line up. And some of the best WrestleManias that I can recall come from the ones with the lowest expectations. But obviously the big story in wrestling right now is the aforementioned end of the Monday Night War. WCW has been purchased by WWFE. They swooped in and purchased the former competition for pennies on the dollar. I did a whole talk about that in my final Nitro review. If you want to check that out, I'd have to link to it right here in the corner. So the WCW buyout doesn't really contribute to much of the goings on of this show, but there is an added sense of jubilation you could definitely feel throughout the whole evening's proceedings. You could even feel it in the opening hype package of these folks from all walks of life huddling around their tiny TVs watching these WrestleMania moments. Even the homeless love WrestleMania. Even clowns and widows love WrestleMania. And then we hear this old grandpa voice saying, "The granddaddy of them all." of Wrestlemania. Like, damn, no wonder Vince didn't like it being called that anymore, especially with that voice going up next to it. Look at the fucking size of that stadium. 67,925 folks packed the Reliant Astrodome. Over 1 million pay-per-view buys, the biggest one in WrestleMania history at that time. We see the fans at WWF New York enjoying their overpriced chicken tendies. Then we see Jim Ross and Paul Heyman calling the action. It's Heyman's one and only WrestleMania on commentary, and boy, what a glorious, pay-per-view debut it is for this pairing. Heyman and JR. It's the first time they've been together since the WCW days. And here they are. Heyman has been brought in the week after No Way Out to replace Jerry Lawler, who walked out in solidarity with his wife, the Cat, over creative differences in the whole Right to Censor storyline. Ultimately, did not work out very well for Lawler. He came groveling back by the end of that year, but this was the stopgap. Heyman comes in as ECW is dying, and he comes in and gets this nice commentary job with JR, and I think these two do have an amazing chemistry all year long. It is really fun to hear these two for as ultimately fleeting as the pairing is. But all I could think about when watching this show again was, at what point during this show do you think Tommy Dreamer would have ultimately done it had he decided to do it? Your opening match for the Intercontinental Championship as Chris Jericho defends against William Regal. Well, in the aftermath of Vince McMahon firing Mick Foley from the commissionership late last year, Mick's good friend Al Snow was campaigning for weeks to take up the mantle, the gavel of the commissionership, after Foley was fired. And so after weeks of this silly comedy stuff with Snow walking around with a bunch of little people as his cabinet members or whatever, Vince finally gives him the chance to win the commissionership if he can beat William Regal. And so William beats him, becomes the new commissioner, and you don't hear a peep from Al Snow after that again. Like, all that time he was there and then he's just gone. I can only imagine he's off TV now for Tough Enough filming purposes, but now it is the Regal regime, and right away he has caught the ire of Intercontinental champ Chris Jericho, and so these two have been waging war. Regal has been putting Jericho in these big handicap matches, and so Jericho has responded by infamously pissing in Regal's tea. You think you're special. Jericho's off to a hot start. He goes for a dive to the outside and sort of overshoots his target. Nice little go-around sequence that sees Regal taking over. You can see this huge red mark on his chest. I think it's actually from SmackDown the previous week because he got lit up in that tag match. Regal is working over Jericho's shoulder like he did on SmackDown. Jericho tries for a lion salt, but Regal puts the knees up. Regal undoes the top turnbuckle, immediately puts that exposed bolt to good use, and the ref just lets him do it. Y2J starts fighting back, but launches himself into another post, Willie with a dang old top rope suplex. Pretty rare to see. Jericho tries the walls. Regal counters and locks in his stretch. Jericho grabs the ropes. More back and forth. Regal's thrown into the exposed bolt from earlier, takes a face buster, slight reposition for the lion salt. Jericho hits it and wins to retain. I give this one 2.5 stars out of 5. This one does feel like it's improved a little bit to me since the last time I watched and reviewed this matchup. I appreciate it a little more, but still feels like it's a fairly safe, kind of conservative style match. It is jarring to go from era to era in wrestling and just see how certain things are enforced differently over time. Like the whole thing with taking off the turnbuckle pad and just being allowed to use it willy-nilly. That almost never flies anymore today, which is just go for it. It's video game rules. We see a limo with the WCW1 license plate rolling up, and Shane McMahon has arrived. Meanwhile, the APA offices, Bradshaw is pacing nervously around as Farouk and Jackie are smoking cigars. Bradshaw's like, "It's WrestleMania, Maggle! Hearts are gonna be broken! Asses are gonna be kicked! Ken Stabler, Nolan Ryan, Bob Phillips, Earl Campbell!" I love those men. My heroes. What warriors. Well, after being too successful in getting rid of Jerry Lawler and the Cat from WWF programming, it was time for the Right to Censor to have a nice WrestleMania swan song as the RTC take on Tazz and the APA in 6-man tag team action. I'm pretty sure there was supposed to be some extended story of the Cat being the captive member of the group. We saw as much the Monday after No Way Out, but then between that and SmackDown, there was the issue coming up regarding creative. And so the Cat walked out, Jerry Lawler walked out with her, and so they had to kind of cover up for it on SmackDown with, Val Venus being beaten and rehabilitated because he committed some terrible, egregious, sinful thing. And it's not really made specific who or what, but it's kind of implied that the Cat was involved, and she's just plain excommunicated, written off of programming entirely, where Val Venus just takes a beating. So anyway, on SmackDown, Tazz randomly gets up in their business, RTC fights back, then the APA shows up to help. By the way, as they make their entrance here, it's worth pointing out that it took me way too long as a fan to realize that the Right to Censor's theme actually has like a drum beat and a bass line underneath. Before the match, there's a little brawl. Jackie even gets a shot in on Old White Sox, as JR calls him, before the bell rings. Bull Buchanan starts off with some big agility, but then Tazz comes in and gets a suplex off. Val works over Tazz, hitting that knees and Russian leg sweep combo he does. Paul Heyman does his best to try and put over like just how many people are in the building by saying, even a censor has to be pumped up by the sheer humanity here this evening. Huh? The Good Father with the former Ho Train attack in the corner. Hey, wait a minute. What did folks rename the move? Let's look at the old comment section and see. He goes for a Vader bomb, but he misses. Bradshaw, the Super Texan, tags in and goes on a big run. He hits Venus with a super back body drop off the top. Big double power bomb by Buchanan and Goodfather on Bradshaw. My goodness. Good goes for his train again, but Bradshaw gets out of the way, hits the clothesline from hell with authority for the win. I give it 2 stars out of 5. Gotta give it some extra love just for how physical this match got at times. A lot of chucking and hucking around and some big strikes. Just, I was impressed with the amount of heft that was being thrown around in this matchup. But boy, RTC, not much longer for this world. Between this and, Ivory's match later, the writing is very much on the wall that they have served their purpose. Backstage, Trish Stratus wheeling a catatonic Linda McMahon through the arena. Wow, she looks so peaceful and natural here. Stephanie McMahon shows up and talks some trash to her mom right to her face. Then Steph tells Trish to hand crush the ice with a spoon for their post-match celebration later tonight. Up next, a triple threat match for the hardcore title as Raven defends against the Big Show and Kane. So the hardcore title's been jumping around a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Kane and the Big Show costing each other matches. Ultimately, Raven benefits from this by regaining the hardcore title. And so Regal initially makes a match with Big Show and Kane for Mania, but then after a hardcore title match spills into Regal's office, the commissioner adds Raven into it as punishment. So Raven comes out first with all his plunder, then good God almighty, look at Kane here. He's looking pretty massive. The action starts out with the two of them immediately, the Big Show finally making his way to the ring. Kane throws Raven out of the ring into Show's arms, then leaps off the top rope onto Show. They fight through the crowd. Some poor guy's colon hurts. You think it hurts now, buddy? Wait until at the end after you've been sitting on that hard chair all night. It's cameraman chaos as these poor guys can't follow shit. Kane and Raven make their way to the concourse. Raven makes a nice dent in that wall. All 3 guys fight in this big supply cage. Show gets hit in the gut, lets out a big ow. Oh! Then Kane throws Raven through a ding-dang window. Show shoves Kane through a door. Then both giants come crashing through another wall. This is ridiculous. Then they fight their way to the golf cart and they immediately crash, almost ending Wrestlemania as we could have known it. The famous story is they were supposed to be driving almost a whole lap around the arena in the golf carts, but Big Show weighed down the cart too much for Raven to make a quick turn, so they just drive off into that ditch, and all the main power cables connecting the whole broadcast or whatever all happen to sit there relatively unprotected in this ditch. And so a couple other inches one way or the other could have been the end of the pay-per-view. Raven could have killed WrestleMania 17. It's funny to think about so many different alternate universes and what ifs involving former ECW talent killing shows and things somehow, like it could have been. So that's all out the window. Now they just walk around for a bit, tussling near catering. Kane throws a big old plastic bin at Show, hits him right in the back. Ouch. Oh man, right in the booking sheet. They have finally made their way back to the arena, fighting on the stage. Show looks to press slam Raven. Kane kicks him. They both fall down into the stage that's filled with powder and sheetrock. Kane jumps in after them, whee! Pins Show and wins the match to become the new hardcore champion. I give it 3 stars out of 5. This is a big, hardcore mess, and it gets a little rough at times where, things could go horribly wrong. Boy, that golf cart chase, I wish we could have seen that be pulled off. But I think for hardcore matches at the time, this one went pretty hard, utilizing glass, destruction of environments around them wasn't really being done on that level before. So I think that was really cool to see them just really go crazy. We see backstage, Kurt Angle is still obsessed with the footage of him tapping out to Chris Benoit's crossface last week, trying to justify to himself that it was never official. There was no bell, there was no match, it never officially happened. I never tapped out. And Edge and Christian are like, hey bud, take it easy. Then we get a shot of Jimmy Snuka hanging out at WWF New York, and then we cut to Jonathan Coachman in the crowd with someone who traveled all the way from Brisbane, Australia. The lady traveled 30 hours to be there for her first WWF event, and she has a message for the world: the WWF rules! Oh, that's all you felt like saying? We get a shot of The Rock arriving in his locker room. You can actually hear some boos, not the last time we'll be hearing that. Then for the European Championship, Test defense against Eddie Guerrero, who is accompanied by Perry Saturn. So last month at No Way Out, they were really teasing what looked to be a big Radicals breakup. Like, ooh, it's going to be between Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, and Malenko and Saturn are going to have to choose sides. And this feels like something that could have gone to ooh, Wrestlemania time. No, they fast forwarded this pretty darn quickly. 2 weeks later, they already had the breakup and the blow-off match with Benoit and Guerrero on SmackDown. They were just kind of done after a minute of that. So now with Benoit facing Angle at Mania, Eddie is getting himself another match with Test for the championship. He already had one a couple of weeks ago on Raw, so this is the rematch. Boy, the size differential between these two is pretty crazy. Test quickly throws Eddie around in the early going before he powders out. Test shows off more of the power. He even blocks a top rope Hurricane Rana attempt. Then it's a flying back elbow. Test, though, gets his leg caught up in the ropes. That gives Saturn a chance to hit some cheap shots. Guerrero now works the leg for a while, works his way into a sleeper hold, wears down the big man. Test comes back with a tilt-a-whirl that sends both men down. Then we get a tilt-a-whirl into a spinning powerbomb. Ooh, that was nice. Full Nelson attempt, Eddie takes Test to Dick Kick City, then Saturn comes in, hits the moss-covered three-handled family Gradunzo, still not enough. Test hits his pump handle finisher, but Saturn distracts him long enough to give Eddie time to kick out. Saturn again inserts himself into the match, but takes a boot for his efforts. One to Eddie, but then Dean Malenko pulls Test off of the pinfall. What a dick! Eddie dinks Test with the title belt and gets the cover to win, and becomes European champion for the second time. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I did appreciate, the work that went into making that big little match look as good as it did. I think Eddie did a great job selling for Test, although I do think it is kind of silly. It took 3 of these guys to beat down one man for the European Championship. Michael Cole is backstage with Mick Foley, the guest referee for Vince versus Shane tonight, and he says, considering your long and problematic history with Mr. McMahon, can you be a fair and impartial referee tonight? And Foley says, if you think Vince beating and humiliating and firing me will impact my officiating, you're mistaken. I'll call this one right down the line, right here in Houston, Texas. Then we see Stone Cold showing up to his locker room, and he looks a bit surly. Up next, a match that was made official literally on the Go Home episode of Raw, Kurt Angle taking on Chris Benoit. Well, 1 month after losing the WWF Championship to The Rock at No Way Out, Kurt Angle had no WrestleMania opponent lined up. But in the weeks ensuing, he had gotten crazier and angrier. He snapped Scotty 2 Hottie's ankle in half and really showing his mean side and everything. Now he starts teaming with Chris Benoit and kind of does almost a backwards motion where he kind of doesn't take Benoit seriously. He calls Benoit's finishing hold that cross-face thing, and so just kind of hopes he can take all the credit and all the glory for this tag team. And so of course that makes Benoit feel disrespected. They basically agree to the match on the go-home episode of Raw. Benoit makes Angle tap out for the first time ever, and even though it was not official, it is totally in Kurt's head. Then on SmackDown, Angle made Benoit tap out to the ankle lock, so both men now having, symbolic tap outs going into this big match. But you would think that the rebound match for your WWF champion going into the biggest show of the year would have had a little more thought put into it. Kurt's got the mic and says that as an Olympic gold medalist and a representative of all 50 states, he's not a big fan of Texas. Your silly flag is short about 49 stars, you big dummies. And he says even these 65,000 bull-riding, beer-bellied Texas yeehaws know that I have never and will never tap out to you. And he wraps up by going, and by the way, people, lose the freaking cowboy hats. You're not 7 years old anymore. Jeez. I just love, when Kurt is able to just so deftly jump between, serious and silly like that. This promo doesn't make me think any less of him going into what's going to be a wrestling clinic with Benoit. And sure enough, we begin with graps. Lots of amateur graps. Really good, pure athletic jockeying. The crowd's digging it. Finally, after some stalemates, Kurt's had enough and just decks Benoit in the face and piles on the pressure on the outside. And Heyman goes, he can wrestle. He can brawl. Kurt Angle can do it all. And I halfway expected him to just keep going, he can do it on the mat. He can do it with a bat. He can do it on a train. He can do it in the rain. Kurt starts popping off some suplexes. He and Benoit trading big chops and strikes. Very good backy forthy. Superplex by Benoit. Now it is his turn to hit the suplexes. Both men trading ankle lock attempts. Both men going for that crossface thing. We get a referee bump, and wouldn't you know it, he misses Angle tapping out to the crossface. Benoit tries to wake the referee up, but he gets hit with the Angle slam. We get a kick out. Kurt goes for a moonsault off the top, landing right into some knees. Now Benoit goes up top, hits that diving headbutt, still not enough. Angle takes Benoit to Dick Kick City. Boy, the referee sure has tunnel vision. Then they have a struggle. Kurt grabs the tights in the roll-up to win dirty. 4.5 stars out of 5. This was a classic technical bout between these two. Lots of great counters and falsies. Very physical. I loved the blend of the traditional, the amateur style graps mixed with the more contemporary wrestling and the brawling mixed in there. It was just a really cool story told throughout with a finish that really makes you want to see more of that. And speaking of which, we will get to that in a second. Backstage, Cole bumps into Commissioner Regal. How's he doing out of the trainer's room? And Regal goes, am I okay? What kind of question is that? Then, what the bloody hell is this? Kamala and Kim Chi have come to attack the colonizers! Then they show a recap of a big free WrestleMania pep rally they held at Fort Hood earlier in the week. Then we go back live in the promo zone. Kevin Kelly with Kurt Angle, and he says, you have to respect Chris Benoit for what he put you through. And Kurt goes, what do you mean respect? There were 2 men in the ring. I beat him. Then Benoit jumps Angle from behind, locks in the crossface, and Angle screaming like mad, getting a measure of revenge after the in-ring thievery. And obviously the fight between them is not over. Things will escalate into that ultimate submission match the next month at Backlash. Coming up next, the big blow-off to Chyna's book tour storyline as the 9th wonder of the world challenges for Ivory's Women's Championship. So late last year, Right to Censor were attacking Chyna for appearing in Playboy. They broke her neck in kayfabe, and then at the Royal Rumble, Chyna challenged Ivory to a match, and then in the midst of that, she re-aggravated her injury and was put on the shelf yet again. So then Chyna wants another title shot, and then Ivory makes her sign this hold harmless agreement beforehand so she won't get in trouble for breaking Chyna's neck again. And so Chyna does make some appearances in the build for this matchup to kind of intimidate Ivory and to throw her around and to sign the contract and everything. But boy, Chyna gets no mic time between Raws and SmackDowns. She might as well not be there, but she shows up to kind of intimidate Ivory. And that's the extent of it. And, it's crazy to think through with hindsight just how this year is going to go for her on her way out of the company, how things are already not going great for her there. And it just seems like this This whole match, this next 5 minutes or so, just feels like they're tying up a loose end because they've got to, and it's a matter of course. Ivory comes out all by herself. Chyna comes out with the big pyro cannon, trots on down to the ring to show that her neck is looking good. Ivory doing some amazing selling, the pantomiming, the cowering in fear at first, but then she turns into this total sneaky heel, blasting Chyna from behind with the belt. So Ivory's all over Chyna for a minute. She goes for a kick, but Chyna catches it, then just flings her around. She stomps her, throws her around some more, hits a big power bomb. She goes for the cover but pulls her up, then does a big military press slam and even more nonchalant pin. Chyna wins and is the new women's champion. I give it a half star out of 5. Really not much to this match, but at least there is like a resounding, definitive end to the storyline. And that is one big positive, I think, with the show overall, is that so many of these matches do kind of have like the correct ending or the right person winning, so to speak. It does suck, though, that this is going to be like, you know, it's not the end. We're going to see Chyna one more time on pay-per-view before she is ultimately out of the company, but this is kind of the beginning of the end, and it's just harder times and a rough breakup coming ahead between Chyna and the WWF. Backstage in Vince's office, you doubled Linda's dosage, yes? You know the plan, yes? And so Michael Cole comes in with questions. What do you think about Shane McMahon buying WCW from out from under you? And Vince says, you want shocking? I'll give you shocking. I guarantee it. Coming up next, it's father versus son. Vince McMahon finally making his Wrestlemania in-ring debut, taking on his own flesh and blood Shane McMahon in a street fight. Originally pitched as Vince versus Mick Foley, but Foley wanted to honor his retirement, and so this was the alternative. And frankly, I think it was a much stronger pivot. So, for months now, Vince McMahon in character has been openly cavorting with Trish Stratus, his good friend Trish, to the point where he is now making out with Trish right in front of this heavily sedated Linda McMahon, who has been sedated ever since she had a mental breakdown when Vince wanted to divorce her. It's a long and messy story. So anyway, Stephanie at first is like, I don't like you doing that, Dad. And then she turns around after No Way Out and is like, actually, I do want to work with you, Dad. So we're going to work together to humiliate Trish, who still says she's cool with it all. But now Shane's had enough, and now he is fighting for his mother's honor. And oh yeah, by the way, WCW just got bought out. So we're going to try and include this into the storyline at the last minute. As we saw the simulcast, Shane McMahon being the one to buy WCW in the end. The closing moments of the final Nitro is the turtleneck Shane McMahon, plugging Wrestlemania one last time. And the buyout, it was a wrinkle. I don't think it hurt the build at all. It was just one more thing to add to the story. It just kind of fell into the company's lap, the timing of it. So it adds just a little bit of intrigue and makes things a little more, although they do kind of paint themselves into a corner for the rest of 2001 in doing this, but it does add just a little bit extra hook on a match that didn't really need it. But, with the craziness of the company being bought out, it's got to be, you got to tie it to some storyline, I guess. So Shane comes out first. He shouts out the WCW wrestlers sitting way up in the skybox. He goes, yeah! There's Lance Storm, Stacy Keibler, Johnny Ace, Hugh Morris, Chavo Guerrero, and the rest. They sure don't look very happy to be there, but the story goes they were apparently possibly going to be involved in the story of this matchup. They were going to be involved in the finish as like Shane McMahon's troops or whatever, but then the story goes, allegedly, Shawn Stasiak, formerly Meat of the WWF, then he was Perfect Shawn in WCW. He allegedly blabbed about it to someone in the wrestling media the night before, and so this was the punishment, and apparently Vince was so close to just firing everybody as a result. That is the story, and that is why they have just been shunted off into the skybox for this night. So Mick Foley, by the way, he is brought back into the storyline storyline as the special guest referee due to some very clever retconning where it's like, oh, it turns out that before you fired me and before you doped up your wife, we actually signed a bunch of contracts that I could use in the future at any time as kind of a creative get out of jail free card. And so that's how we got Foley added as the referee to this matchup. You see him coming out looking young and healthy here. Boy, taking a year off from doing horrific bumps can do wonders for you. Vince comes out next. He opens up with some slaps and some potatoes. Shane fights back, ugly looking spear as Shane gets on top for a moment. Stephanie comes in and slaps her own brother. They're fighting on the outside. Shane using a sign as a weapon, diving off the barricade onto Vince. Kendo stick shots aplenty, then Shane does a little jab combo with theatrics. Vince is laid out on the announce table, Shane goes up top, Stephanie gets between them, pulls Vince out of the way, Shane crashes and burns. Then on cue, out comes Trish, wheeling Linda down the ramp, but Trish has had enough and she slaps Vince across the face. Once! Yeah, you go girl, that's a hell of a comeuppance. Ultimately, Stephanie and Trish start fighting, and Trish chasing Steph out of the arena. Vince has this moment where he stares down Linda like he's gonna do something. Foley has seen enough, tries to wheel her away, but Vince lays him out with a chair. Then he just physically picks Linda up, brings her into the ring, and sits her down in the corner. I just cannot imagine the amount of work that went into rehearsing this matchup and getting Linda to go along with being picked up and thrown around like that. Vince brings Shane into the ring, beats the hell out of him with a bunch of trash cans. He goes for the kill, but then Linda rises up, and that fucking pop from her getting up for her seat, taking Vince to Dick Kick City, then following up with Foley coming back, getting his shots in. Oh my God, you could hear that pop in Dallas. It was that huge. And JR with one of the best lines of commentary all night. Shane performs his first coast-to-coast to his old man with the trash can, and he gets the win. Dysfunctional Mania, they call it on commentary. I give it 4 stars out of 5. Boy, this was a sloppy-looking battle, but it was a hell of a story. What a payoff. And, you wish that Trish would have gotten a bit more of a, comeuppance moment there instead of a single slap. I think she does get something a little bit later on TV, but this moment clearly for Linda. And I think it is a good thing that WCW, the wrestlers, didn't get involved in this match, because that would have been too many cooks in the kitchen. When you already have Trish and Linda and Stephanie and Mick Foley getting involved, it's just way too much. The WCW guys would have muddled this story. So again, it was nice in the moment of the go-home week to have that Shane buys WCW, but it's it doesn't really serve a purpose for this particular match. Coming up next, the Dudleys, the Hardys, Edge and Christian. It's TLC 2 for the Tag Team Championship. So the titles have bopped around a lot the last couple of weeks, but in the process of this build, we have seen the debuts of a couple of recent ECW guys joining the ranks in this tag title feud. Rhino with Edge and Christian, Spike Dudley with Bubba Ray and Devon. Ah, what a time to be alive. We get the intros for the 3 teams, seeing the body language on Edge and Christian especially. That was chilling to me, because they weren't the happy-go-lucky guys smiling and pointing. They look as though they're psyching themselves up for what's going to be a painful battle. Everyone's moving quickly to start things off. ENC do a lot of damage to the Hardys early on. A lot of back and forth climbing attempts. The Hardys double team. The Dudleys double team. Bubba catching Jeff, powerbombing him onto Edge and through a table. The Dudleys have set up Chekhov's stack of tables on the outside. We get 3 ladders in a row. They has fight. They all fall down. Spike Dudley now runs in, hits some Dudley dogs. 1 to Edge, 1 to Christian through a table outside. But now Rhino has come in and is causing chaos, hitting Jeff with a table Gorner. Now here comes Lita. She does the thing to Edge. She hits Rhino with a Lita Kenrana. Then Spike dinks Rhino, who falls into the ladder, knocking Edge off. We get a Dudleyville device to Rhino. Lita dinks Spike. 3D to Lita. Edge and Christian with more total dinkage. Jeff Hardy pulling out the Jeff Hardy Memorial Ladder. He climbs all the way up, hits the Swanton on Rhino and Spike. Spike does get a legitimate injury from this bump, by the way. Devon and Christian left dangling off the belts for a while. That looks scary scary as hell, and the landing looks worse. Jeff trying and failing to walk the tightrope of the ladders, not working out. Would have been cool if they managed to do that. They are able to recover to the actual cool part of this spot when Jeff is hanging and Edge does the spear off one ladder in midair. That was incredible. Jeff and Bubba on top of the tall-ass ladder. Rhino shoves them off and they plummet through Chekhov's stack. Rhino then carrying Christian onto his shoulders, helping him climb the ladder and grab the titles while Edge slows Devon down. Edge and X-Jin do it again. 2 WrestleMania victories in a row. They win their 7th pair of tag titles in 1 year. I give it 5 stars out of 5. This is a match that I could honestly watch again and again. I like the previous 2 matches in their series, like the Triangle Ladder match and TLC 1, and get that same kind of sick pleasure out of it, for good and for bad. These 6 individuals changed the wrestling game forever. These types of matches really just made everything elevate exponentially as a result of that. But you can't deny the influence that these 6 have throughout all tag team wrestling, not just when it comes to the violent stuff, but they were innovative in their own ways, being able to incorporate multi-man spots with all these different weapons. And it's really, and it's a credit to all of their success that they were able to, for the most part, have long careers after the fact, even after this chaos, even though their careers have since been defined by those 3 weapons. It's crazy to me to hear, like Matt and Jeff were talking in the fan access segment before this. They say, this could be the last time, laughing in 2025. We know better about that. It's just crazy though. This is a fantastic match. It is era defining. It is tag team wrestling defining for years to come. And this single match here is gonna just help continue these 6 men's, like it's going to build their legends forever and a day off of this. We get a recap of fan access. They announce the new attendance record for the Astrodome. Then it's time for the Gimmick Battle Royal. And truly, it could only exist during this time period, because I feel that like WWE back then during the Attitude Era, they would never be so self-referential to their own mistakes, because a lot of these gimmicks are pretty silly, short-lived mistakes. And I just feel they certainly wouldn't do that in today's era either. This flux period, between eras that we live in now, I think is the only time it could exist with this kind of lineup. Because look and see who we have. First of all, we have the guest commentary team. You got Mean Gene Okerlund. You got Bobby the Brain Heenan. Hell yeah, let's fucking go. So cool to see Heenan gracing a WrestleMania stage one more time. He and Gene doing the commentary for this is exquisite. It's a real shame. Like, they would go on to use Gene for many more years after this in kind of a backstage or like the studio role. And Heenan, God, you really wish they could have done more with him. Outside of a couple of DVD interviews and this Hall of Fame induction, there really wasn't more use for Bobby Heenan, and that is a damn shame because he's still in fine form here. We got the Bushwhackers wearing their Men from Down Under gear. Duke Drozy, boo! The Iron Sheik, Earthquake looking a bit slim and trim. The Goon, aka Wild Bill Irwin. Doink the Clown comes out. We get a great line from Bobby Heenan.
Gotta love this guy. Why?
Kamala with Harvey Whippleman and Kimchi, the Repo Man. He's got the rope. Jim Cornette, who I love that his gimmick here is just, he's Jim Cornette. Nikolai Volkov, Michael P.S. Hayes coming out to Bad Street USA. The One Man Gang, and apparently the original plan was for him to be Akeem, but he had lost too much weight, couldn't fit in the outfit anymore, so One Man Gang it was. The Gobbledygooker, which they spell Gobbledygooker in the lower third for some reason, they cannot stop cutting back to Bobby and Gene during the worst possible times. Like, as all the intros are going, we cut back to the commentators and they're just like they catch them right when they're in the lull period where they're not saying anything. It looks so awkward. We get Tugboat, Hillbilly Jim, still looking in incredible shape. Don't go messing with the country boy, a-do-do-do, Brother Love. And finally, Sergeant Slaughter, the only other person besides the Gooker who gets a little video for some reason. The match begins. The Repo Man is eliminated in the first 2 seconds. Hell of a payday, pal. Cornette and Pritchard spend most of the match just kind of locking up amongst themselves in the corner for a while. The Gooker is easily eliminated, as is Tugboat, by Earthquake. What the hell? Kamala eliminates Quake. Mean Gene calls him by his shoot name for a second.
John Tennant. Earthquake is out, yes.
Then Jim eliminates Jim. Everyone's getting taken out incredibly easy. It's like Royal Rumble on super easy mode. Slaughter dumps out Brother Love. Hillbilly Jim takes them both out. Sheiky Baby eliminates Jim and wins the whole thing. But then Slaughter, that sore loser, he puts Sheik in the camel clutch and stands tall at the end. I give it 2 stars out of 5. You know what? It's a silly, poor quality battle royal. Let's not mince words here. Everyone here is past their prime. There is a startling amount of overlap between the people in this matchup and those who worked Heroes of Wrestling or the 605 reunion. But still, it was silly, but that helped make this WrestleMania feel that much more special, just to have this silly little break in the middle of it all. And yeah, on the strength of Heenan and Okerlund's commentary is another reason I gave it such a high rating. Coming up next, The Undertaker, the hometown dead boy, taking on Triple H. So Triple H is in kind of a lame duck situation going into this WrestleMania because he beat Steve Austin at the previous pay-per-view, 2 out of 3 falls, but Austin already has the title match regardless, so what's Triple H really doing? Meanwhile, The Undertaker wants some spec from the H-Man, and that leads to a series of altercations where Triple H lays out The Undertaker backstage. The dead man, he wants revenge. Oh, but Triple H and Stephanie are all-time snitches, and they put in a restraining order to keep The Undertaker from getting to Triple H, but then they do a little bit of outsmarting, Kane chasing Stephanie away. Now Triple H doesn't have the shield, so, you know, he's able to get some licks in, and then they hold Stephanie hostage. They're holding her above on some platform or whatnot. And so that's how they compel William Regal to give them the matches that they want. You know, Kane wants the big show, and then, you know, Taker wants the match with Triple H. There's a great moment of heat by Triple H where he has all these fake cops attacking The Undertaker, and he goes, "These aren't cops, they're all friends of mine." And then Triple H on the Go Home SmackDown even destroys Taker's prized personal motorcycle. He bashes it with the sledgehammer. He throws it off the stage. By the way, this look that he has here with the hat and the shades and the gloves, this is the most badass Triple H will ever look. The most badass he ever did look, ever will. Like, nothing will top this. This is the coolest he's ever looked. I'm sorry. Motorhead is here to kick our ass, apparently. They're doing a live rendition of the Triple H theme. Taker makes his way down to the ring. The match starts out with a big old brawl. They immediately break the backup Spanish announce table.
Come on! Oh, God! It's getting to be goddamn ridiculous!
Nice height on the backdrop early on. Taker loudly calling for old school, and he takes forever to set it up, which is probably why Triple H was able to counter it so easily. The H-Man starts to pile it on. He shoves the ref at one point. Ref shoves him back. Taker goes bup, 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 and starts to fight back, but it's short-lived. Triple H brings out Sledgy, but the referee takes it away from him. Then he takes like 100 years talking to Mark Yeaton in the corner. You ever see that where the referee is just like, "I'm making it really clear to you. You gotta take this and you gotta put it there like we always do. These are the rules. You, this, there, here, there." And they just like, it's so obvious when they do that because they're setting up for the big thing. And sure enough, referee's lightly smooshed. He's out of position, so we don't get the 3 count after the chokeslam. Then Taker just elbow drops the shit out of the ref. Mike Chioda is then dead for the next 10 minutes. After this, as the rest of the match goes on and things enter the second act. Taker and H make their way up through the crowd. They continue to brawl. They fight their way into the tech area, climbing up level by level. Triple H grabs a chair, just beats the hell out of the dead man with it. Chair's all bent up and shit. He goes for the kill, but Taker goozles him, hits a big stalling chokeslam off the platform, straight to hell, by God. Of course, they cleverly cut around it so you can't quite see where Triple H is falling or landing on at first. The EMTs tried to intervene, but then Taker's like, "No, fuck that boy," and dives down onto him. They finally make their way back to the ring, walking by the random Billy Jack Haynes sign. And as they make their way to the ring, JR points out the referee has received no medical attention up to this point. He is still motionless in the ring. Good Lord, those elbows are deadly. The crowd is electric for all of this. They see Taker with the sledgy, they go nuts. Taker winds up but is taken to Dick Kick City. A lot of hard hitting back and forthy. Triple H goes for a tombstone of his own. Taker counters and hits his own, but Kyoto still down. Is he dead? Taker goes for the oh, never mind. Triple H blasts him in the head with sledgy. Somehow the Undertaker kicks out, but now he is busted open. H is furious. He gets him in the corner with some punches, which puts himself in position for the last ride. The last ride. Taker wins and extends the WrestleMania streak to 9-0. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. What a tremendous story this was. Great second and third acts. Mike Chioda's selling is a bit ridiculous, but be that as it may, these two do have a great chemistry. It's why I enjoy, their matches at future WrestleManias, at 27 and 28. They have a really good chemistry for these kind of high stakes matches, and this era for both men is so different than those later matches were about a decade later. And it's just, great moments, great hell of a fight between the two of them. And it's definitely a lot of fun to watch. But up next, the main event. Just one more fight about a lot of things. It's for the WWF Championship as The Rock defends against Stone Cold Steve Austin. Of course, this is a rematch from the WrestleMania 15 encounter they had in the main event, but it's so much more than that. So much has changed in those short 2 years. Back at WrestleMania 15, Rock versus Austin was hardly about them. It was way more about Austin versus McMahon, and also to an extent, The Rock versus the Big Show Paul White, than it ever really was about Rock and Austin, which by that point had already been a rivalry in the Intercontinental field, for instance. So coming back to it 2 years later, when both men have just become absolute megastars. Austin brought the WWF into this new golden era. Then when he gets hurt, The Rock takes the mantle and he becomes an even bigger star. The WWF does even better business by the year 2000. They are truly going crazy, and they are taking off in ways never imagined. And now that Austin is back, still a megastar, but he needs to get back the belt that he feels that he needs. And so you have babyface versus babyface. Austin won the Royal Rumble in his comeback. The Rock beat Kurt Angle to regain the championship the month before. So now, the collision course is set in. The two biggest stars in the WWF, they both happen to be babyfaces, and it's just inevitable that these two were going to fight again. So, with all those pieces in place to make it a very compelling match on its own, you know what we need thrown into this? We need Steve Austin's shoot wife, terrible actress, Deborah, to be involved in this. Deborah comes back after being gone for months, it seems, and she's like, well, Vince, I want to be a manager again. And so Vince McMahon's like, oh, great, I've got a plan for you. We're going to make you the manager of The Rock, who happens to be fighting Stone Cold, your husband, in the main event of WrestleMania. So then it creates this whole dynamic of, Deborah's caught in the middle of this professional and personal rivalry between the two. And now Austin finds, The Rock responsible for her well-being. If she gets hurt while she's out there with you, it's your ass. And he holds Rock responsible. So he beats up Kurt for trying to put the ankle lock on her. He beats up The Rock, and then The Rock fires back, hitting him with his own Stone Cold Stunner. All this is going on. Deborah's caught in the middle. She doesn't know what to do. Then finally, 2 SmackDowns before WrestleMania, they have the big sit-down interview with The Rock and Austin, moderated by Jim Ross. It's a classic promo between the two, and it really lays out just the motivations and the characters really well for this main event. Really gives a lot of weight to it. But Austin, he already pretty much tanks the whole Deborah involvement in that promo when he goes, take Deborah out of the equation. Bam, she non-factor. And it's like, okay. And then the next week on the Go Home SmackDown, literally 15 minutes to go before the end of the show, before WrestleMania, Vince is like, oh, by the way, Deborah, you're not going to manage Steve after all. And so, yeah, that was great. And you're not going to show up in Mania either. Spoiler alert. So all the weeks of strife and tension we built for you, it's all for nothing. Basically, it made things vaguely interesting, but you could have easily just had Rock and Austin doing pretty much all that without Deborah getting involved and potentially being part of the main event at Mania. It is such a dodged bullet that she was taken out of the match when she was. Because I think if she was involved in this matchup, everything else being the same, it just would not have been good. I just don't think that, Deborah was, I think she was very specific with the people she managed that worked. It was like Steve McMichael, Jeff Jarrett, and that was pretty much it as far as I know. Like nobody else did it ever really make sense when I saw Deborah out there managing. And so The Rock especially, I could kind of see what they were going for with it, but Deborah had no chemistry as a manager with anyone, especially like The Rock, who has always been just this big solo act. It just seemed doomed from the start, and it's like, I wish I knew where it was going to go, because it just seemed like so out of nowhere to bring it in, and even more crazy just to rescind it like at the 11th hour. But honestly, who cares about all that, because nothing can top the promotional value of My Way by Limp Bizkit and the weeks and weeks of recurring and frequently updating hype packages. Just the tune of the song, and just here's the latest on the Austin Rock rivalry. Here's what you missed. And they just show the recaps, and like, they don't do that for any other match on this whole show, and I think that is what helps sell this so much. It's an epic song. It's great for the theme. It's great for the storyline. It's just a perfect song of the time, and it works so well with this story. And so yeah, no amount of AI in today's day and age can possibly match the aura, as the kids say, the aura farming, as it were, of guys like The Rock and Steve Austin and Fred Durst. This combination is S tier. Just before the match begins, Howard Finkel says there will be no disqualification, and JR and Heyman are so befuddled by this, they bring it up every 2 minutes on commentary for the rest of the match. It's no disqualification for some reason. The match gets underway in a hurry with a brawl. It quickly goes out into the crowd. What a shock. They get back into the ring after about a minute. Austin hits a superplex. Rocky makes a big face. The crowd is definitely pro-Austin, obviously, since they are in Texas. He is Texas boy. The Rock, they're not booing him. Well, okay, they are booing him, but it's a little bit, and it's still cheers. Like, for the most of this matchup, most of what Rock does, it immediately you hear a crowd like cheer, and then it just melts into boos by the end. The Rock backs up the referee. Hebner actually trips on the steps, kind of scary. Rock goes over to check on him, comes back and gets dinked with the dinger, by which I mean the ring bell. I love this part here. The Rock is just kind of climbing himself onto like the announce table, and just as the camera's panning away, thump, the table just collapses under his weight, which is hysterical. They almost miss it. Austin fighting real dirty here as The Rock is bloodied, but the champion's still able to stay in the fight. He throws Austin into the turnbuckle, the rattlesnake himself exposed. Austin bloodied as well. He gets dinked with the dinger, somehow kicks out. Back on the outside, a lovely looking slingshot into the ring post, one of the best I've ever seen. Austin goes for the stunner. The Rock blocks it and applies one of the worst Rock shooters of all time. Shades of Austin and Brett at Mania 13, my ass, Jim Ross. Then Austin's like, now here's how you do a sharpshooter. He even locks in the $1 million dream later. JR is going nuts over that. He's like, when he was the ringmaster! We almost get the Brett Piper finish from Mania 8, but Austin kicks out of the cover. Rock hits his own stunner on Austin. Still not enough. But wait a minute, Mr. McMahon is making his way to the ring. What's the meaning of this? They trade slams. Rock hits the people's elbow, but McMahon yoinks Rock off Austin. What a dick. Rock chases McMahon around the ring, walks right into a rock bottom by Austin, but there's a kick out, by God. The stunner attempt is blocked. The referee eats shit on the outside, but like, why? It's no DQ. Austin hits Rock in the mean bean machine, tells Vince to bring in the chair. What? Austin holds Rock up. Vince hits Rock with the chair. The referee's back in the ring. The count. The kick out. Austin with the chair again. He goes for the kill, but Rock with the him bottom. He's had enough of Vince's bullshit. He beats him up a bit, walks right into a stunner. 10 out of 10 bump by The Rock. But there's another kick out. What the hell? Vince hands the chair to Austin. Austin with another dink, the cover, another kick out. How is this happening? So then Austin, the dial turns, the shit gets real serious. Not one, not 2, not even 10, 16 consecutive chair shots on The Rock. You couldn't get away with this in a video game on easy mode. The cover, the win. Austin is the new champion. And then, to put the cherry on top of this wild scene of Austin beating The Rock half to death with the chair, we get something we never thought we would witness. Austin and McMahon shaking hands. WTF, mate? How can be? Austin has sold his soul to the devil himself. They toast over Rock's carcass, then Austin blasts Rock again with the title to seal the deal. What does this mean for the World Wrestling Federation? 4.5 stars out of 5 I'm going to give this one. What a match. What a story, what an ending, what a relief that Deborah was not involved in this matchup. Again, I don't know what their intention was with Deborah in the story. I'm not saying that Vince is a much better outcome either, but it's better than Deborah. And look, I can still remember watching this on scrambled pay-per-view, by the way, not watching it for reals, hearing it and hearing what happened, hearing that call from Jim Ross, and me being just like flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. How? Why would Austin do this? I mean, it still doesn't make any sense. It's still the timing of Austin doing it. We get it, because he's desperate to become the champion again. He's going to do what he has to do. But why would even McMahon be cool with this after everything Austin did to him? What's his beef with The Rock necessarily? That by 2001, I didn't quite get that. But, it was ultimately very poorly timed because The Rock was going to be on his way out. Triple H being hurt so soon after this. They couldn't have predicted that, obviously. But there was all these different things that made the heel turn a lot more sour than I think it could have been if circumstances were different, because it didn't make a lot of sense given their collective past. It was poorly timed. It did ultimately turn a lot of fans off of wrestling in a way that really the business has never seemed to fully recover from. But son of a bitch, it was still an incredible moment, an incredible, shocking way to end this event after the big emotional roller coaster we just saw with that last matchup. Well, folks, it's been 8 years since the last time I sat down and reviewed this show. So what are my thoughts on it now? My final grade, revisiting it, re-ranking things, recalibrating the rating system. Well, folks, long story short, my final grade for Wrestlemania 17 in a re-review sense is unchanged from the original. I think it is still a solid A pay-per-view. It is still one of the best pay-per-views of all time. There's still a special place in my heart for WrestleMania 19, but I can see why people consider this to be the greatest of all time, because it remains the gold standard in terms of, spectacle, of drama, of variety, of conclusions. This does really have a sense of finality to it. This does feel like this is the curtain call of the Attitude Era, because so many things are changing. The Monday Night War is over. Steve Austin, who was this big baby face, he's turned heel now. What's that gonna lead to exactly? Meanwhile, the XFL is circling the drain outside of the WWF right now. The WCW invasion is going to start and eventually end. And throughout all that time, it just feels like it's the beginning of a very long and winding road of now what? Because as much as we like this show and as much finality as there is, this does feel like the end of a very distinct era, kind of similar to WrestleMania 40 not too long ago. That felt like the end of the McMahon era as we knew it and the start of something new. WrestleMania 17 also feels a lot like that, because you get a lot of payoffs, you get a lot of just yay, rah, rah, happy endings and whatnot. Very few new beginnings. Can you look at this card and possibly predict what WrestleMania 18 would have looked like, taking the WCW purchase out of it? Can you try and picture what the WWF is even going to look like in the next year? It's pretty scary to think about it. I don't think anyone could have predicted, say, the two-man power trip forming and then kind of crashing the way it did. That certainly affected things. But when you just kind of look at year by year, the company's main event scene doesn't fully become realized and into what it's going to be until WrestleMania 21. That's where they're still working through the remaining legends they have until they finally get, John Cena and Batista falling in their laps, and they can build up the future there. But regardless of that, whether you look at it in the big long-term picture or even as a standalone, WrestleMania 17 remains the best, if not one of the best WrestleManias of all time, depending on your personal preference. But what did you think of Mania 17? What were your favorite matches and moments for the granddaddy of them all? I want to hear about it in the comments section below. And with that, I have finally recovered this lost episode, this lost WrestleMania review. It was great to get back into the swing of things and watch that again. Stay tuned for a little bit later this year because I am going to close the book on the WWF in 2001. I will tackle a last couple of pay-per-views from the year I haven't touched yet. The stuff that took place between WrestleMania and Backlash and before the invasion begins. So I'll be taking care of those. But the next classic review I am doing in sequence. After this one, we're going back to TNA. We're going back to the year 2006 to continue that story arc. And every match is going to be in a cage because it's Lockdown 06. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.
JCW presents Stranglemania. GCW's Collective at Horseshoe Casino, April 17, 2026. With the lineup that'll even make your grandmother wet. JCW Stranglemania will be the biggest thing to hit Nevada since the A-bomb. And unlike when your grandma visited, there won't be piss on the sheets when they leave. Well, hopefully not. JCW Stranglemania is a featured event, part of GCW's Collective, which means they kick ass and they're respected throughout professional wrestling. And if your favorite JCW wrestler ain't at this event, chances are he's in traction. And if he's not in traction, well, he's probably dead. Sorry to break it to you. Because this event's lineup will be the creme de la creme. That's French for the best, for those of you who are ignorant. Once upon a time, there were heroes. Good versus evil. But at JCW, there are no heroes. It's only survival of the fittest. So go thieve some tickets, or you can buy them at jcwlv.eventbrite.com.